We've all, at one point or another in our lives, have decided, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I'm not going to do what God wants me to do. I'm going to go my own way. And maybe there's some of you in the room right now, or maybe you're watching online, and you feel like an outsider. You look at your life, and you look at your past, you look at your habits, you look at what you have done, and even what you're doing now, and you think, there's no way that Jesus is going to accept me. And perhaps other people have made you feel like an outsider. But in this passage, Jesus reveals the goodness of God by being the good shepherd that lays down his life, that calls out, and he brings in. And then in verse 16 of John chapter 10, Jesus says, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them in also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. So as our good shepherd, Jesus brings in. Now, one of the things that angered the religious leader of Jesus' day, the ones who were supposed to be the shepherds, the thing that really made them mad about what Jesus did, is that he would bring in those who they wanted to leave out. Jesus was always about bringing in those who were labeled as outsiders. Just a few examples. Zacchaeus, y'all have heard of Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and that wasn't bad enough. Not only was he a wee little man and a wee little man, like he was really short, all right? But he was a tax collector, and nobody liked tax collectors. And yet Jesus said, hey, I'm coming to your house today. So Jesus was bringing in. But what did the religious leaders say? He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. They put a label on him. Jesus spoke to the woman at the well in John chapter 4, and she had a bad reputation. And she was a Samaritan. Jesus was a Jew. She was a Samaritan. Jews and Samaritans didn't associate with one another. Men didn't talk to women in public places, and yet Jesus is here having a conversation, crossing all of these boundaries. And the disciples were surprised that he was talking to a woman. But Jesus was bringing in a woman who lived a sinful life. In Luke chapter 7, we read, washed Jesus' feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. I mean, talk about a humbling act of love that this woman does. And the religious leader said, if this man was a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman that she is a sinner. So the shepherds of Jesus' day, they were labeling. They were pushing outside. They were pushing away. And what does Jesus do? As our good shepherd, he brings in. He brings in the outsiders. He brings in the one that have been pushed to the fringes. And you know what? That's good news for us, because wherever you are in your relationship with God, at one point, we were all Zacchaeus. We were all the woman at the well, because we're all sinners. We've all, at one point or another in our lives, have decided, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I'm not going to do what God wants me to do. I'm going to go my own way. And we've sinned, and we need somebody to come in and rescue us. And the truth is that Jesus brings in, that's good news for us. And maybe there's some of you in the room right now, or maybe you're watching online, and you feel like an outsider. You look at your life, and you look at your past, you look at your habits, you look at what you have done, and even what you're doing now, and you think, there's no way that Jesus is going to accept me. Once he really knows all the junk in my life, there's no way that he's going to bring me in. And perhaps other people have made you feel like an outsider. But in this passage, Jesus reveals the goodness of God by being the good shepherd that lays down his life, that calls out, and he brings in. So regardless of our past experience with other shepherds and leaders, despite whatever we've done in our past, whatever baggage that we carry, Jesus stands in front of us, and he invites us to follow him. So the question for all of us today, for kids, for adults, moms, dad, grandparents, the question for us is really kind of a simple question, but it's not always easy to answer, is, are you following the Good Shepherd? Are you following Jesus? Are you listening to his voice? And are you actively pursuing him? Because there are other voices that we can listen to. There's other interests and passions and things that we can pursue to try to fill our lives and satisfy the needs that we have. And are we going after those things, or are we listening to the voice of the shepherd? In John chapter 6, we learn that Jesus is the bread of life. And as that chapter begins, Jesus feeds the 5,000. That's a pretty awesome miracle, right? 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Jesus feeds all of these people. All right, incredible miracle. But then later in John, after that event is done, Jesus and the disciples, they go to another place. So the next day, the people who were fed, they look around, they're like, Jesus is gone. And so they go looking for him. They chase after Jesus because they want more of what Jesus had given to them. So they find Jesus and they're like, Jesus, where did you go? And so he continues to talk to them and teaches them. And he talks about this is what it looks like to follow me. And in that same chapter, like this is like the next day, shortly after he feeds the 5,000, near the end of John chapter 6, we read this verse. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. So they had experienced the Good Shepherd. They heard his voice. They saw what he was able to do, and they decided to walk away. They decided that they were not going to listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd. So our question, are you following the Good Shepherd? As he calls each one of us to follow him, are we going to allow him to do for us what only he can do? There's no other friend, there's no other leader that can do for us what Jesus can do. So will we listen to his voice? Will we follow him? So today, the question, just put that out there. I want you to think about what your answer would be. Are you following the Good Shepherd?